Okay, I'm going to talk about diversity. So, the way I see it, there's kind of three camps you can fall in. Okay, you either believe that diversity is a strength, you believe that diversity is a threat, like a weakness, or you believe that you're kind of neutral, right? Diversity is not good or bad. So, I'm going to kind of fall in the middle here, but not exactly. I'm going to add a little nuance to that. I believe that diversity is not necessarily good or bad. I think that diversity is a response to stress. And where does that stress come from? Well, the stress comes from the people who believe that diversity is a weakness, okay? And ultimately, if you believe that diversity is a threat, if you believe it's a weakness, you believe it's threatening you, okay? If people are diversifying, like the US culture today, right? We have a lot of younger people who are, as an example, identifying as part of the LGBT community, or we have, younger people who are challenging the economic structure of the United States, right? They're leaning towards socialism instead of capitalism, for example. But the bottom line is that we are diversifying, right? And you could also say that immigration is playing a role. People come into the country and maybe they don't assimilate, and that's why America is known as a melting pot, right? Again, bottom line, the United States is diversifying, okay? And if you view that diversification as a threat, and you fear that diversification, you fear people who are different than you, ultimately that leads to you making attempts to control those people that you fear. You attempt to control the people who are different than you. And in doing so, you create fear in those diverse groups. Okay? Because when you seek control over people, when you try to control them, they are no longer free, technically, right? If you're controlling people, they're no longer free. That creates fear in your opposition, and not even your opposition, really, because they didn't necessarily become your opposition until you tried to control them. Because again, those people who believe diversity is a strength, the people who are diversifying themselves, they're just being individuals. They're just increasing the individualism. It doesn't mean that they're trying to control anybody in that process. You can put your beliefs out there, but that doesn't mean that people are shoving things down your throat. Okay, nobody is shoving any beliefs down your throat. The only way beliefs get shoved down your throat is with force, and that's not happening. Okay, we cannot pretend that just because people are talking means that, or writing books or whatever it may be, that it means they're forcing you to do anything or believe anything. And this is an argument I see coming from the right a lot, but it also comes from the left. But oftentimes the right will say, oh, this LGBT community, for example, is forcing their beliefs down my throat. That's not true at all. You don't have to believe anything. You don't have to believe anything that anyone says. Okay, if it's part of the First Amendment is to be able to say what you want to say without the threat of violence, without a threat of being controlled in that process, right? So if you fear people who are different than you, if you fear diversity, and you use that fear to allow you to seek control over people, again, control is a response to fear. If you use that fear to control people, you are effectively trying to control people's First Amendment right. And when you do that, they're going to respond in kind. They're going to, again, try to control you in response. So what does this look like? Well, the right bans books, and the left responds by trying to censor the right on social media platforms. Or maybe the left did it to the right first, and the right responded by banning books. Who knows where the cycle started? We can't say for sure. The bottom line, though, is that when you seek control over your opposition, when you seek control over people that are different than you because you fear them, they're going to respond in kind. But, again, there's another thing that happens. There's another type of response. So when you seek control over your opposition, over people who are different than you, okay, in an attempt to diminish the diversity, because, again, you fear that diversity, what happens is you encourage more diversity. And how does this happen? Well, if one side looks at the other side and, again, seeks to control them, they're going to dig in deeper to their beliefs and ultimately radicalize farther into their beliefs. So when the right tries to control the LGBT community, before you know it, the younger generation is joining the LGBT community at increasing rates, okay, at exponentially increasing rates. And likewise, as the left tries to censor the right, what does the right do? Well, the right digs in deeper to their beliefs, and next thing you know, they aren't taking vaccines because they think that the vaccines are going to magnetize them or something. The point is that radicalization breeds radicalization if you allow your fear to enable you to seek control over your opposition. Okay, and this is ultimately why I'm kind of neutral on whether diversity is good or bad. I don't think it's good or bad. I think diversity is a response to distress. And so, for example, when you put one side in distress, when you put a species in distress in general, they're going to diversify themselves to find solutions to that stress. They're going to diversify thought, appearance, or even diversify their genders, right? That diversification is a response to distress that is caused by the opposition or another party trying to control them because they don't like that they are different than them. But again, if you're just an individual who's practicing your own individualism and you're diversifying yourself, but you're not seeking control over anyone, then you've done nothing wrong. And if you respond to someone trying to control you by diversifying yourself more, you've still done nothing wrong. The only time you do something wrong is when you allow your fear of the people who are different than you to enable you or to encourage you to control people. It's when you try to control people when you cross the line. And that's ultimately the problem here. So if you think that diversification or that diversity is a threat, you are part of the problem. Diversity is a strength in that it is a response to control. It is a response to people who fear your diversity, who fear the fact that you are different than them. So the thing is if we all just accept each other for who we are, and we stop trying to control each other, and we accept individualism, what happens is the diversity stops, okay? We stop diversifying ourselves because there's no need to seek alternative means, or rather, there's no need to seek for solutions to the controls that people are putting on us. And it's like diversity is like an evolutionary response to distress, which is caused by another party trying to control you because they fear your diversity. So it's like an evolutionary like trial and error process rather. We seek to solve that distress from all possible angles, and the way we do that is we diversify so that we can come up with more angles to solve that distress. So if you are somebody who fears diversity, if you're somebody who fears people who are different than you, the best thing you can do is ignore them and accept that they're different than you. Otherwise, you're going to cause more diversity. You're going to cause, ultimately, more radicalization. And I've talked about this process of authoritarian leapfrog a lot, where when one side seeks to control the other, and they look to the government to do it, the other side is going to respond in kind, and the government is going to oblige both sides, which is how we fall into authoritarian fascism. It's these divide and conquer strategies, right? The ruling class divides the middle and lower class among anything they can: social, political, racial, cultural, religious divides, and then they start to fear each other, and they start to control each other, and the ruling class obliges both sides' calls for control. And the reason they do it is because the ruling class doesn't care. The ruling class is the ruling class. They rule you by allowing you to control each other, and they're so far above the law they don't fall victim to those same controls until shit hits the fan eventually, right? Until there's a revolution. So just give that a little thought, okay? If you're somebody that looks at diversity as a threat, and you use your fear of that threat to seek control over those people you fear, over that diversification, you're going to cause more diversification. and it's going to backfire on you, and also, again, cause more diversification. And this is why the culture is seemingly like floundering right now. There are so many different beliefs, so many different genders, right? There's going to be more and more genders if you keep criticizing these genders, and it's not even a bad thing. Again, diversity is a response to control, it's a response to fear. So diversity is a strength in the sense that that strength is a response to a weakness, to control. This is how, again, this is how we slip into authoritarianism. We become so fearful of our fake oppositions, and we deny individualism, and we seek to control people because they're different than us, and then ultimately we become victims of the ruling class in the process. So just give that a little thought. Thanks for watching.